Welcome back to the channel, my brothers, or welcome to the channel if this is your first time. My name's Andy R, and this is the Brotherhood of Men, a channel solely dedicated to getting you men out there a better outcome in your lives. Today I want to say this: if you live in a country or a state that legally recognises prenuptial agreements and you don't have one in place long before you get married, you're a bloody idiot and you deserve everything you get. Now I'm going to explain why in this video. So let's get started. So yeah, if you live in a country or you live in a state that legally recognises prenuptial agreements, because not all do in the Western society. Here in the United Kingdom, prenups have never been a thing. They've never been recognised by the court system. And the reason that is because of superseding contracts. It's just the same as in business. If you have a contract in place that says you earn X amount of money for this role, and then you get a promotion, you get a new contract that says you have more responsibilities, but you also get more money and more perks, etc. That new contract, once you've signed it, supersedes the old contract. You can no longer rely on the old contract, only what's in the new contract. And it's the same in the divorce courts. You go to a divorce court and you say, look, we signed this thing before we married. And the court says, I don't care, you signed a marriage licence, that's the contract we go by now. It supersedes the prenup. So if you're lucky enough, and you are very, very lucky, if you live in a country or in a state that legally recognises prenuptial agreements, one, be grateful you do, and two, make sure you have one in place before you get married. And if you don't, and go down that aisle and sign that piece of paper, you are a bloody idiot. And everything that happens to you is going to be your fault. Let me explain it like this. When you buy a car, whether it be new or used, before you turn the key in the ignition and drive it for the first time, you make sure that you've got insurance in place. You ring up your insurance provider and say, yeah, I no longer need insurance for this old car because I bought a new car or newer car, and you give them the vehicle registration, VIN number, whatever, and they transfer the insurance over before you drive that car, because you don't have a working crystal ball where you're able to see the future. You don't know what's coming down the line. So the very first time you drive that car, it might explode. Or you might pull out into traffic and get hit, or you might hit somebody. And if you haven't got insurance in place, you are financially liable for every piece of that damage. And God forbid if somebody got hurt in that accident, because then you could be talking in the millions, and you are on the line for it. But you make sure that you've got car insurance, because you can't see the future, because you haven't got a working crystal ball. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. You don't drive that car hoping it gets hit, hoping it bursts into flames, hoping you go off the road and harm somebody. You do it on the off chance that that might happen. You're covering your back for the future, if nothing else, financially. It's the same if you buy a house. If you buy a house, a lot of mortgage providers will not even sign contracts or exchange keys with you unless you've got home and contents insurance in place before all of that. They will actually deny you the money, would deny you a signing of the contract because you haven't got it in place. In fact, a lot of mortgage providers actually provide that financial insurance as well as part of the package. So you get the insurance, but at the same time you get the mortgage, but at the same time you get the insurance. Because you might move into that house, and before you do, if you haven't got the insurance in place, there might be a hurricane, there might be a flood, it might burst into flames. And if you haven't got the insurance in place to cover you financially to rebuild or refurbish after one of these disasters, you're going to be financially ruined. So you have it in place before you do it. With the car, you have it before you drive it. With the house, you have it before you move in, to cover you in case of eventualities for the future. It's clever thinking. Financial institutions know this, that you more than likely are not going to have all of the money to replace your house, your car and all the rest of it if something happens. They make their money on the thousands upon thousands, if not millions upon millions of drivers and homeowners who have no problem throughout the time of owning that car or house. They make the money from the deposits that come in each month. But a small amount of that profit is paid to those who do have something happen to them in the time of them owning those things. And this takes us back to why you should have a prenup. If you live in a country or a state that legally allows prenuptial agreements, all it is insurance for your future. If you haven't got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, you haven't got 2 pennies to rub together to your name, you still need a prenup. For the simple reason you don't know what the future's going to bring. You might win the lottery. Not likely, but you might. But you might make something of yourself, because men are always trying to make better of themselves. So you might start a business that becomes wildly successful. You might inherit from a relative you maybe didn't even know that is a good chunk of money. Anything could happen to change your circumstances for the better or the worse, but you always try and plan for the worst. That's what insurance is, and that's what a prenup is. It's there to cover you for the future. Now, what do you put in these prenups? Well, don't be ridiculous with them. There is such a thing as unconstitutional clause. An unconscionable clause. Sorry, I was getting constitution and conscionable completely mixed up there. Do apologise, brothers. An unconscionable clause. In other words, something that a reasonable person reads and goes, well, that's ridiculous. Nobody had agreed to that. And they can throw it out. So be reasonable in what you put in a prenup. Think to yourself, what are your red flags? What are your red lines that you will not cross? For instance, for most men and for most women, fidelity is extremely important. And this is why it's important that you have the prenup written. Because when you go down the aisle to a religious ceremony and speak the words, or if you go to the courthouse, you have the civil side of the marriage, they're only spoken words. And there's an old joke that goes along this line, and I'm sure it was written by or spoken by a lawyer. And it goes something like this. A verbal contract is not worth the paper it's written on. Now, it's a clever joke, because what it's basically telling you is the truth. What you agree in speak doesn't stand up in court, because it's he said, she said. So you can shake hands and you can agree between the two of you anything, and then one backs out on it. You have no recourse in law because there's nothing written. What's a verbal contract isn't worth the paper it's written on. The point is, it's not written on paper, and that's the thing that stands up in court. If you have a written contract, and this happens daily, people go into court with their contract and saying an employer or a contractor or whoever broke the contract and I demand regress. So it's a joke, and it's clever, and it teaches you a lesson. A verbal contract isn't worth the paper it's written on. The vows that you say in the church or in the civil ceremony are verbal. They mean nothing. They do not stand up in court. It's the contract that you sign that stands up, and that's what a prenup is. You're putting down all of that verbiage, all of those vows, if you like, in written form and saying, I agree with these totally, and we need to abide by them, both of us. You make it fair. You make it that it applies to both of you equally. Otherwise it becomes an unconscionable clause. If it only applies to one person and not the other, where's the equality in that? A contract is a meeting of minds. So you put down in there that either of you cheat. The person who is cheated upon gets everything, and the person who is the cheater leaves basically with their personal effects and the clothes on their back. But it covers both of you, because if you're stupid enough to cheat on your marriage, then you get what you deserve. But if she's stupid enough to cheat on your marriage, she gets what she deserves. It's in the contract. You're covering yourself for the future as well. So you're probably getting married in the hope that you'll have children together. So make sure they're covered in the contract as well. If you divorce for any reason, you both have 50-50 access to the children. You both stay as their parents. Not one person gets the lion's share of the time with the children and you get the odd weekend, or vice versa. So all of these things can be put into the contract, and all of these things will have legal status, especially when it covers both of you. It's also important for you to understand that a prenup is definitely got to be in place long before the marriage. Long before the marriage. In fact, I would suggest raising the sticky subject of prenups before you even propose. Now, you, my brothers who've been watching this channel long enough, you know my views on marriage. It's high risk, low reward for men in today's society, and it's high reward, low risk for women in today's society. The court system, etc., has been skewed so far in one direction that it becomes almost toxic for men to go into marriage. But that doesn't stop men by the thousands upon thousands of each year going down the aisle and getting married. But why would you do that? I mean, I've made enough videos about why it's not really a good idea for men. Well, the thing is that men are optimists by nature. We we always say they're a pessimist and optimist, but on the whole scheme of things, by nature, men are optimistic. It's a case of, we've grown up all our life, we've been knocked down, we've been belittled, we've been talked down to, we've been disrespected from when we were little kids up to adulthood, that by then we've hardened ourselves to the knocks in life. Women don't get that. They get coddled, they get protected, they get told everything's going to be all right. Men never know that. We know life is unfair, and because we carry on living, we're optimistic of the future, that, hey, things will work out. If I put a bit more effort in, if I do a bit more for myself, things will work out. And generally they do. But to go into a marriage with that mindset that things will work out, when the evidence is completely against that. 50% of marriages end in divorce, and that figure is rising. So in a decade's time, that might be 60%. And if you haven't got any insurance, think of it that way, the prenup, it's insurance to protect you in the future in case it does happen, you're a bloody idiot. And everything that happens to you, it's no... There's another old saying, it goes like this: act in haste, regret at leisure. Think about that. If you're hasty enough to go down the aisle without some insurance policy, like going into a house without home insurance, without driving a car, without car insurance, and something bad happens and you haven't got that in place, you're going to financially ruin yourself. Well, that's exactly what happens in a divorce. 70% of divorces are instigated by women. So the likelihood that your marriage won't last is out of your hands, because 70% of the time it's a woman who wrecks the marriage by instigating the divorce. And if you haven't got that document in place to protect you, you kind of made your own bed. So it's very important that if you live in a state or a country that recognises prenups and you've decided you are going to get married, then get one. Put it in place, make sure you've covered yourself, just like you would car, life, and with home insurance. All of the insurances that you take out are to cover yourself for the eventuality of things going bad. That's your sensible, rational brain trying to cover yourself for things you can't see coming down the line. You're not a soothsayer. You're not a crystal ball reader. You can't see the future. You know, the Aborigines said that Man walks through life backwards. We can see everywhere we've been, but not where we're going. And that's exactly how we are. You can't see what's coming. You can only see what's been. So make sure you cover yourself for the unforeseen. So as I said, make sure it's in place long before the marriage. In fact, I'd raise that knotty subject before you even ask a woman to marry you, before you propose a ring and engagement. In a roundabout fashion, just one of those comfortable chats that you have. Say, you know, if we were ever to get married, you'd be happy with a prenup, wouldn't you? See what her reaction is. If she's outraged and thinks, oh, it's terrible, why is she with you in the first place? What's she hoping to get out of this? If she's thinking long-term marriage, but she doesn't want a prenup in place, I would be, alarm bells would be going off in my head. I'd be asking certain questions of what she's looking for. If she's open to the idea and going, do you know what, yeah, I don't think I'd have a problem with it. And then if you talk, well, it'd protect both of us, wouldn't it? I mean, we'd put in and say about fidelity and that. I mean, you're just in a relationship. You're happy to, you're happy together at the moment. You know, everything's sunshine and rainbows and roses and everything's beautiful. At that time, she's thinking long term to the future, I could have this forever. I'm so happy at the moment. Yeah, that seems like a good idea. And if I've got to do that to nail this guy down, I'm happy to do it. But make it equal. That there are rewards for staying within the bounds of the contract. But there are also punishments and consequences if you step out of those bounds for both of you. Make it equal. That way it can't be pointed out of any unconscionable clause. Also, make sure you get it in place long before the marriage, because the nearer to the marriage that prenup is signed, the more likely it'll be thrown out later when you most need it. You see, if it's a month, couple of months before the wedding, a week, whatever, that you sign it, she can claim that you coerced her into signing that contract. It was a coercive contract, therefore has no legal status. You see, gotta think ahead. That's why I said bring the knotty subject up before you even ask her to marry her. And at the time of asking her to marry her, saying, oh yeah, we do need to sign a prenup. We agreed on that. Bring the fact up that you had the conversation already. Yeah, we agreed on that, because all of a sudden she might have second thoughts on that prenup. And again, that would be alarm bells going off, wondering what is it she's trying to get out of this marriage. So if you live in a country or a state that legally recognises prenuptial agreements in the court system, and you don't have one in place long before you get married, you're a bloody idiot and you deserve everything you get. Do you agree with me? If so, leave it in the comments down below. Do you disagree with me? If so, leave it in the comments down below. It's one of the few things that men can do when it comes to marriage that can probably negate that horrible 50-50 statistic, and that's 70% being instigated by women. They're less likely to instigate a divorce and more likely to work at the marriage if there are consequences written down that the courts recognise. They are less likely to cheat in the relationship if it's in the contract what will happen if they do. They are less likely. It's there to protect you, my brothers. This is why I make these videos, to help men. Anyway, if you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button. If you think of somebody that you know will get something from this video, share it with them. In fact, share it on social media that you want. I want to grow this channel, and I can only do that with your help. If nothing else, give the video a like. None of these things cost you any money. I'm not asking anything from you other than your support. Anyway, I'm going for a cup of tea because, well, I think I've earned one. You, my brothers out there, you take care of yourselves, because if you don't, who will? And I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.